Welcome everyone. This is day 2 of our 2021 Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management Online Research Symposium. We will start the day with a very interesting discussion panel, and we are really privileged to have with us 5 quite distinguished and worldwide experts to share with us their expertise and their knowledge. We are focusing on a topic that I assume it addresses everyone's interest and curiosity. We are going to look into issues related to what is the new normal, if there is already one, about tourism research. What are the opportunities and the challenges, and what are probably the ways to address them? Before we start, let me introduce our panel. I'm Professor Marianna Sigala from the University of Piraeus in Greece. I will be chairing the session. I'm also the chief editor of the Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management that is sponsoring this online research symposium. We also have, as I said before, 5 members in this panel. All the members, they aggregate, represent both academia and industry. We have a very good mix of perspectives, but also from gender. We have Dr. Allison Anderson from the company, consulting company Episteme. I can probably pronounce this very well since I'm Greek. Amery Burleigh, the general manager of Movenpick Hotel Jumeirah Beach. Professor Joseph Sear, the Center for Tourism Research, Wakayama University, Japan. Dr. Freya Higgins-Desbiolles, the Adjunct Associate Professor, University of Waterloo, and Adjunct Senior Lecturer from University of South Australia. And Steve Hood, Senior Vice President of Research for ASTR. Let me spend a few minutes to kindly introduce and say a few words about our distinguished panel members before I give them the floor to position themselves into our new topic, and then I will open the floor to everyone to bombard them with the issues that you really have in mind and you want some feedback and insight. If you don't mind, I will start with ladies first. Dr. Allison Anderson has spent her career in tourism in various positions and roles as a consultant, business advisor, academic, strategic planner, and public servant. She was formerly the head of research and insights at Tourism Tasmania. She has quite a lot of experience and insights from a destination point management point of view. She has directed numerous various marketing programs, such as the Tasmania Drive Journeys project, brand health benchmarking and segmentation. She has been part of the Tasmania's 2020 Tourism Recovery Working Group and also represented Tasmania on the National Tourism Research Committee. She is also the founder of Episteme, a consultancy firm specializing in delivering informed strategy for the tourism industry across Australia and New Zealand. She holds a PhD and she specializes in urban design and tourism. And she is also the director of the Northern Tasmania Development Corporation brand. Next, we have Amery Burleigh, the general manager of Movenpick Hotel, Jumeirah and Beach. She is coming also from the industry. She has more than 30 years experience in the luxury hotel sector. She has worked for brands such as Four Seasons, Fairmont, Sofitel, and now Movenpick in many countries around the globe, United States, Australia, Asian Pacific, Egypt, and she is currently based in Dubai. She has survived several multiple economic crises, COVID included at the moment. So she could say, and I could say, she has quite a lot of resilience and probably experience to share with us. She is also a long-time advocate of gender equity in the workplace. Let's move to our male participants. I'll start with Professor Joseph Sear. He's currently the co-editor-in-chief of the journal called Tourism Geographies. He is also the professor at the Center for Tourism Research at Wakayama University, Japan. He holds various adjunct positions in universities in Australia and New Zealand. He is also an elected board member of PATA, the Pacific Asia Travel Association. He has published several books, edited various guest special issues in journals, and he's also a public speaker in channels like The Conversation, World Economic Forum, Nikkei, Asia Japan, among various others. Dr. Freya Higgins-Desbiolles, another lady. She is adjunct senior lecturer in University of South Australia and also an adjunct associate professor at the Department of Recreation and Leisure Studies at the University of Waterloo. Freya is well known as the original thinker of many various ideas, such as tourism as social force, socializing tourism, and she's a strong advocate for defining tourism by the local community and to support responsible and sustainable tourism. She's focusing on social justice, human rights, and sustainability, among many other various things. She's widely published. I'm sure many of you have read some of her work or all of her work. And she's also a sought-after media commentator, appearing in many channels and media worldwide. Last but not least, Steve Hood is the Senior Vice President of Research at STR. He has been there for about 25 years now. And he's also the founding director of SHARE Center at STR. This is the program of STR that heavily focused to support tourism and hospitality education, to get involved with research and to use the resources that STR offers to them. Steve has served and he still serves on many advisory boards, and he's honorary professor for several leading schools, including Cornell, Penn State, Virginia Tech, University of Delaware, Colorado, and the École Atelier de Lausanne in Switzerland. He has received various awards, including the ICRI Industry Recognition Award, and I assume several of you probably have met him personally or virtually in various events. So thank you all for joining our discussion panel and for your time to share with us what has been bothering you during COVID, but even before that. If I may start, as I said before, I will give the floor to each participant for 5 minutes to position himself or herself on the topic, and then I will moderate a Q&A session with everyone. So Amery, if I may start with you. You are from the industry, lots of experience from hospitality. Can you share with us what has happened in terms of people's expectations or industry provision of technology that has been boosted or changed due to COVID, and how probably people are going to buy or sell hospitality products online? I think you're in mute.
Apologies. It's been such an interesting journey the last 18 months. And so, yes, I did want to speak a little bit about distribution because as so many industries have been disrupted, traditional distribution has probably seen the largest disruption. And it's, we found that, if there was traditionally 4 main ways that people book travel, whether it was walking into an agency like Flight Center or, your mom and pop shops in the villages that they've been going to for 20 years, booking their annual holiday. That was one way. Then there was corporate management, travel management companies where your corporates would negotiate rates, then give it to a company to manage so that their corporates, wherever they work, just book a hotel. And then there's direct booking to the hotel and loyalty, and then of course online. And we see that the longer the traveling, so that's your traditional European, American, Australian, Eastern European, the ease of travel, they've been using agencies. And so they've relied on this traditional method for more. You see the younger markets like Asia Pacific, Middle East, Africa, that have younger travel patterns, or less mature. And you see that they really understand the digital age. And so COVID forced everybody to get onto a computer. So whether it was for learning reasons or for dreaming about travel, even my parents who are in their 80s, they started mastering the computer. And what we saw is the traditional methods, the agencies, because they didn't have the flexibility with their clients when COVID hit, and they were suffering from cash flow and they had outstanding debts, they all of a sudden started making business decisions that they didn't really have a long-term view about. So they started saying to their clients, no, we're not going to give you a refund. We're going to keep your money. You can rebook. And so people started looking at that as, oh, hold on a second, I have thousands of dollars in an agency and I can't travel. And they weren't giving refunds. We saw that even surprisingly, Expedia Travel did refuse to give refunds. And so that intel started, traveling through social media, watch out, and people started sharing nightmare stories of lost monies. From a hotel standpoint, it also had an impact on our cash flow, because if the small agent wasn't paying the local agent, they weren't paying us. So the traditional method of booking, you couldn't go to the shops, literally, you couldn't leave your house. And so everybody was online dreaming. And I think that booking.com, hotel beds, their marketing really was sensational, whether they did geo-target marketing, because people are on their computers. Steve, we work with STR so closely, and we've been watching trends, and we work with these industry people to help understand what's happening. And what we've seen is that travelers have changed their priorities, and how they book is now digital. And we're talking about what is the new norm. I don't even think there is a new norm. I'm sitting here in Dubai, and I can tell you, STR, who has every bit of data everywhere that we rely on for everything for our forecasts, nobody saw what was coming in Dubai come. We are seeing something that's so unprecedented and unique. And it's an ideal situation where you have a major world event with the World's Fair opening up, you have markets opening up. And what we've seen is just a boom in people. We didn't know if Expo was going to have an impact, and all of the digital marketing and social media campaigns that Dubai has done in the last 18 months to keep us entertained on our computers at home and in social media has definitely paid off. And so there's a real aspiration to come to Dubai right now, but we're unique. I lived in Australia for 16 years, and domestic travel has always been big there, but the people are just craving to get off that island. So the new norm, we're nowhere near the new norm yet, because people haven't really started traveling. I can say that the last 3 weeks have been the most dynamic and exciting time, and distribution has taught us 3 things. It is very last minute. Even your traditional markets like Germany, who book 6 to 8 months in advance because it's their big annual trip of the year, their booking window is now 14 days. And we've never seen that from this market. The UK is very similar. So what we're seeing is what was traditionally a window of time of that less than 30 days. That was our online That's your online and corporate booking window. Corporates are coming back to Dubai because of Expo, but they're not traveling the world. And this short lead time is now giving this traditional agent and the local destination management companies who book hotels, it's giving them a real run for their money, because people are saying, you guys weren't very flexible. We're not 100% sure that we're not going to have a fourth or fifth or seventh wave. Our border's going to stay open. And then number one thing we know people want right now is flexibility and safety. They want health and safety and flexibility. So online offers that, and we've seen literally it reverse from traditional direct bookings being 50 to 60% of our business and online being 40, to now seeing online being as much as 60%. And then there's one new disruptor to distribution that we've seen, and it's local influencers. And local influencers are, we have one here in the UAE. And when we came out of recovery last year, he was doing more money in commissions than Booking.com worldwide. For the month of August 2020, this guy raked it in, because he had a domestic market that had money, and there were more hotels on his app than there were on Booking.com booking hotels. So influencers, if they're really good, all of a sudden that direct market. So his influencers didn't have email, so they weren't a candidate for loyalty. They weren't a candidate for, they might have used Booking.com in the past, but it became bookings by WhatsApp direct to the hotel. And so we had to buy 5 phones and give them to, salespeople and front office people. And his market, it's a Middle East market. So they wake up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they kind of have breakfast and then start booking things at midnight. So we were literally getting calls 24/7. So we saw something just totally unique in the world. So when we talk about the new norm, I think there's a lot of questions. And the first question is, when is the new norm? Are corporates going to come back? Is MICE business going to come back? And our travel agencies, when all the cards fall down, because they're just up in the air right now, when they fall down, is the traditional agency still going to have legs? And so I think that's, we'll leave those questions to academia, but that's kind of our experience in hotels and hospitality right now.
Beautiful. Thanks for this insight, Amery. I would say if we need the norm, we also need stability. And I don't think we have seen any stability or ability to predict anything from all sides, isn't it? The tourists, but also the suppliers. So yes, we can't expect anyone to have a routine or a predicted behavior if he or she doesn't know what's happening the next minute. Allison, you come and you have a broader eye view bird from a destination point of view. What would you say are the new realities at a destination level in terms of visitors, destination stakeholders, how they have been addressing issues, or what we might expect?
I have a little presentation. Is this the time to share that, Marianna, do you think? Or
yes, please go on, but if you can respect this 5 minutes, so we have time for everyone, that will be brilliant. Thank you.
Yes, I know you said that after you saw how long it was, and I did practice trying to make it very short. So I promise that it will be okay. There we go. Can you see that all right?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Thank
Just
you.
make it, yeah.
Is that okay? Yeah.
Good.
Awesome. All right then. So I have had a lot of thinking about this. One of the things we're doing at the moment in my consulting job is writing quite a few destination master plans, because there's a lot of people who are taking this opportunity to think about or rethink tourism and rethink how they plan their destinations. And while there's not a lot of people around, because in Australia, unlike other places like Dubai, there actually are not a lot of people around. So there's a lot of businesses with a bit more time We're finding that we actually have a lot of work going out and talking to people. And so I've noticed probably there's lots of changes, and Amery, all of the ones that you mentioned, we have seen as well in Tasmania, in terms of the changes in the way people are behaving with their bookings and things like that. We're also noticing in how we do our research and put together things, 3 sort of major changes. So the first is in the destination master planning. We have to consult widely. We've had over 100 Zoom meetings in the last couple of months just trying to write the master plan for Victoria, which is the state where Melbourne is, for those of you who don't know. And we've had to do the entire thing on Zoom, including my colleagues who are actually based in Melbourne, because they can't leave their homes either. Melbourne, for anyone who doesn't know, is the most locked down city in the world at the moment. So it's been really interesting. We're dealing with deputy secretaries of government departments, very powerful public servants, and we're noticing that the traditional power structures are changing. Very high profile people that we're talking to still have dogs that jump on their lap while they're chatting to us in their kitchen. And so there's a lot less armour and a lot more frankness in how we're engaging with people, which we're finding actually to be quite valuable. On the other hand, the operators and the tourism organisations that we're talking to are suffering quite badly from fatigue and thinking about their headspace. So when we're talking to them about horizon planning, there are people who have also just been to the bank and told us this, talking about how they're going to dig into their retirement savings to pay their staff. So really, it's been a very difficult and challenging time to try and engage people to talk about what the future might look like and how to plan. So that kind of coalface research about what people's priorities are is very, very challenging. And also building a regenerative message in a time of economic hardship. So we're talking about maybe, balancing social needs and environmental needs and, trying to make tourism actually create value for the destinations. And at times that might be at the cost of the financial bottom line. And that's a very difficult message to talk about at this moment. So we wonder how well these plans are going to go into the future. Quickly, yes, I know, Marianna, I'm going fast. Okay, number 2 is knowing our people. And Amery, I think you talked a lot about that already. And so I won't sort of dwell on some of the things that we have learned, but some of the questions we're asking ourselves, particularly here in Australia, we rely very heavily on survey work from research panels. And the way people are engaging with those, we had questions about the reliability of those before we started and before COVID, and now I think that's actually even more in question. And also people are getting much more heavily surveyed, so they have a lot more people wanting to know a lot more, which is creating fatigue and I think potentially challenging the quality of the results we're really getting from that work. A lot of in Australia, a lot of the research actually requires face-to-face contact. The International Visitor Survey and the Tasmanian Visitor Survey and a lot of our tracing work where we actually ask people to allow themselves to be tracked on mobile phones, all in here actually requires face-to-face recruitment. And we are really struggling with that because you can't approach people in airports anymore. That's really just not the done thing. So there's a lot of challenges there, aside from the fact we haven't got as many visitors anyway, of maintaining any real understanding of the activities of people as they're travelling. And the final sort of, and I won't talk about the things that we know because I think Amery, you kind of did that. There we go. And the final one, sorry about that, is a truly new starting point. So what we noticed prior to COVID was that things were really changing anyway. And Steve, you've got a bit of a cameo mention in this one. What we have noticed is that there's a lot of changes around how people book, as you said, Amery, but I think that change was happening anyway, and how people are engaging in the customer journey, from aspiring and thinking and, you know, being sort of buying into the brand, right the way through to planning, booking, experiencing, and then sharing their experiences. We've noticed there's a lot of data available, but what we're finding is that sales are being made to the smallest possible unit, and companies are controlling the distribution of the data. So we'll be talking to a regional tourism organisation here, here and here, and they've had a sales pitch from DNA or STR or Tourism Sentiment Index, all this. They don't know who, they don't have enough money to contract all of them. They don't know which ones to contract. And when the state level tries to contract them to bring that in, they have serious restrictions on how much data they can actually share with people. And so it makes it quite difficult to feed into a comprehensive destination planning process and having that data feeding in on a regular basis. And so I think there's an opportunity there to coordinate and contextualise against more robust data sources such as exit surveys that are weighted up to actual visitor numbers. So there is, I think, an opportunity there for us to draw this in a more central way. There you go, Marianna. I hope that wasn't too fast, but they're probably some of my big observations.
Beautiful. Thank you, Allison. It's interesting to hear that COVID is changing dynamics within destination stakeholders as well. But you have also raised a good point that we should not only change the priorities of what we need to know, but also the ways that we research what we should know. But I am in some way not that surprised, but surprised to hear that previously from Amery, that priorities of people is health, safety, and they need flexibility. I haven't heard responsibility or sustainability being a priority. Now I hear from you that the industry realizes that it needs to do something about sustainability, environmental protection, but it's not the appropriate moment because the financial perspective is really hurtful. So I will go to Freya, who, as I said before, she's a really strong advocate of human rights, sustainability, social tourism, and ask her perspective. Is COVID really going to change things? Because we as academics, I think we have spent most of our lockdown time to philosophize in some way, if I take the liberty to use this word, saying, yes, we will become more sustainable, X, Y, Z, we need to do that, and people will behave differently. I don't see that. So what's going on from an academic point of view in that perspective? Feel free to share your beautiful PowerPoint, Freya.
I would love to share my beautiful PowerPoint, and I love your question. So thank you for provoking me with this, because I think it'd be good to be critical about it. That's one of the things that both Joseph and I are involved in, is critical tourism research. So yes, I saw that Allison used the word regenerative tourism, which is getting very popular. There was a group of articles that came out under the leadership of Alan Liu that looked at this possible moment as a moment of transformation, and scholars were invited to look at that critically. I actually think, though, that COVID is going to be an era-changing event, just as the Spanish flu was at the beginning of the 20th century. It changed the dynamics of society, economies, jobs, and living, as well as politics. And I think we're going to see the same thing. My own work has intervened in this space to talk about the possibility of socializing tourism. And, you know, like Marianna's asked, is this reasonable? There are interventions that academics make that are normative, making calls for the way things should be, and trying to influence practice that way. So how realistic is it? I believe that COVID-19 showed us in many societies around the world, particularly at the beginning, the need for social care, social connectedness, community, and social welfare. So in fact, in places around the world, We saw hotels being used, for instance, to house the homeless when we wouldn't have thought of it otherwise. And the hope is that these learnings carry on to when we go into whatever the next era is going to be. Whether it's a new normal, I think that we're not going to see a new normal, but I'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing, in addition to the social connectedness realization and the need for communities to care for each other, that we're not isolated individuals, is a challenge to the capitalist individualistic system, that we're looking at needing social welfare and some forms of socializing to take care of people within our communities, and a challenge to the political systems, because in fact, we've seen politics has not been able to manage effectively the difficulties in public health versus economic pressures and so on. So here in Australia, our political system is in conflict about the political system versus federal capacities versus state and territory capacities. And in fact, it's leading to a shift in those relationships. I don't think that's different in other places, that the question about the capacities of our political leaders and our political systems is being brought up. Now, what we go into in the future, the reason I question whether we have a new normal is there's been this great cartoon that people have looked at that said, we're very COVID focused at the moment, but there's other crises that are coming. COVID is likely to cause major economic problems, recession, depression, what may be coming. We are all looking to climate change as we get ready to go towards Glasgow. Worse than that is possible biodiversity loss, mass extinctions possibly happening. I would add into this the social crises. We've seen with Trump and the right-wing movements around the world, this right-wing extremism, white supremacy, those ideas. There's serious social tensions evident in places around the world. And then geopolitical tensions, which I think tourism scholars, tourism researchers need to take account of. And by this, I mean the unfortunate situation of the tensions that are being raised by the US and its ally Australia against China. And as we think about getting tourism back to some kind of normal, are we going to deal with those political issues, which will have major implications on the market that many of us relied on, the Chinese traveler? These geopolitical tensions have real meaning. So my advocacy here is that when we think about researching in tourism, we need to think about tourism within its larger context and the influences that come from the political environment, the environmental environment, social changes that are happening. There may be a retreat from globalization and the global connectedness that we took for granted. So this is a very momentous set of changes that we're possibly facing. I will note that ICE released a report just recently coming out of their global experts review. And those experts talked about tourism being in its larger context, but when they discussed the issues through a SWOT analysis, they didn't talk about the things that I'm talking about. So I think it's really important as we think about analyzing tourism futures, that we not only consider what's happening within tourism, but we look at these external contexts. Again, COVID is one. Why didn't we expect COVID to have these implications for us? We were being warned by public health officials that global pandemics were coming and that this kind of event could happen. And yet the tourism industry, by and large, seemed oblivious. I will say the exception to that, of course, is the guru Michael Hall, who predicts all things happening. So what do I think about tourism research? These are my questions. Is let's ask some critical questions in our thinking, and in that we may open up our eyes a little bit. What is tourism? I've challenged the conceived wisdom that tourism is a system of connecting up tourist demand with the supply of the products and experiences that the tourism industry provides to meet that demand, saying that the local communities could be at the center of the way we define tourism. Who are we studying then? Is it only tourists and the businesses, or do we look at host communities? Or do we look for those that are marginalized from tourism, those people that are missing, those entities that are missing, because it may be more than human? With whom do we do research? Is it only businesses, or are we also looking at NGOs, the public service? Are we looking at youth. Antonia Conessa is doing great research, bringing in youth voices into tourism thinking. Who benefits from tourism? This is probably the most important. If host communities don't benefit, they're not going to support it. Why are we doing it? And are we doing research that matters? And I know, Marianna, I've just gone over my little bit of time. AASCB, the accreditation body for business schools, has said we need research that matters. And in their view, it's about social impacts. I think that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you, Freya. I always admire your disruptive and challenging way of thinking. But I think you're right. We really need to see different things or the same things from different perspectives. And I think for a long time, we might have, I don't know if I can call it the wrong or the correct focus. So refocusing probably. You also raised an interesting question that the way we do research or with whom we do research might need to be changed. And I already sense a widening gap, if I can call it gap, between what the industry wants or thinks and what we, the academics, think, or we think that we know that the industry thinks and what we think that we should be doing for them. So I will go to Joseph, because I know you have a lot of experience in terms of collaborating with industry and researching with them, and to share with us your ideas in terms of how should we progress in tourism research, in terms of what we research, with whom, and how to do it best.
I was just about to start talking, and then I realized I need to unmute myself, right?
Yes, it doesn't help only to have a microphone in front of you.
That's right. Thank you, Marianna, and thank you, Sam, for organizing it and keeping me on time with all your emails. Otherwise, I would have completely missed it. I wanted to discuss this in a very discursive way. I won't use a slide or anything, but I've got some notes here that will keep me on track and within the 5 minutes. But what I wanted to do in the first place, spotlight how my vantage point here in Japan influences the way I look at things, because as an Australian, I pay a lot of attention to what's happening at home. But then when I turn off my computer or go off my telephone, I then face another reality, which is quite different. So one of the things that affords me is two ways of looking at the same problem very much differently. But before I get into the meat of what I'm going to talk about, I find it fascinating what Amery said about the use of WhatsApp. That's put a new spin on how WhatsApp serves us, right? But it also, the broader question that everybody wants to know is, what's the new normal going to look like? Are things going to change? And I opened, I think it was the New York Times here, which is published with the Japan Times at the same time. And the idea of trip stacking, I'm not sure if anyone's seen this notion of trip stacking, where people now are booking 2 or 3 modes of holidays at the same time in case the first 2 falls over, right? And it's introducing a whole a world of pain for operators, I would imagine. So when we talk about the new normal, when I read these kinds of things, it gives me less hope and less optimism. But nevertheless, let me get started with what I was going to talk about and the question that you posed, Marianna, about research. To give you a context, here in Japan, by the end of 2019, they were forecasting 30 million tourists, 40 million by 2020, and 60 million by 2030, right? Of course, the Olympics didn't quite happen the way it was planned. We never got to 20 million here at the end of 2020. But last week, the government, the new prime minister said, no, we are still going for 60 million by 2030. That would be a 100% increase in just 1 decade, from 30 million to 60 million. So boosterism very much still reigns supreme here within the Japanese government. But the question that you raise, Marianna, how do we engage in joint publications, joint work with government and industry partners? We discussed this at the Parter board meeting last week, because as much as for us as academics, oftentimes we ask ourselves, what does industry want to know? What do communities want to know? What does government want to know? And we quite timidly set about doing the things we do without engaging in a meaningful way, asking the questions. So I've got a set of eight points here. Cut me off if I'm running over time, Marianna. But the question of, and I'm sure this occupies many researchers, how do we engage with practitioners like the ones we've heard from today, Allison and Amery and Steve, to come. And often we want to ask them for money to help us with our research, right? How do we ask for money? And how do we say, you know, we will give you a return on your investment? Because then we have people like people at Episteme, like Allison, doing this amazing fine-grained work. Because very often when academics are approached to do something, our timelines are very long. Consultants can say, yes, we can do it in 4 weeks, right? So for us as academics, we ask ourselves, how do we more productively enter that space confidently? So one of the first things I talk about here is this idea of paying it forward. You know, in most of the things we do, oftentimes industry will ask us to go and do a talk or read a document. And often there are times for us to start paying it forward, to build the relations we need for times when we go to them and say, can we have some money? Can we work together? So this idea of paying it forward in research, I think, is a really, really important one. People like Freya do a lot of media engagement, and I think these are really important ways to emphasize just how relevant academic work is to the general public. I think building a dialogue with government and industry is really, really important. You know, how many of us go to industry conferences? You know, very often we find ourselves at academic events, possibly, and I don't say this, I say this generally, in echo chambers. How often do we go outside of our academic discourses and speak to industry people about this? And as I said earlier about the research we do, be upfront and clear. Very often as academics, we have constraints we work under: teaching, student time, you know, publications. The government and industry partners often want knowledge and want it quickly, knowledge that they can apply. How do we negotiate these kinds of differences? And it kind of reminds me of what the late Professor David Harrison said rather cheekily once. He said, you know, in a paper he wrote, he said, what has theory ever done for us? But he was being sarcastic, right? And very often industry and government people say the same thing. How can all of this help us understand better what we need to do? You know, how can all of this that you're writing about help us achieve the outcomes we want? So, and the question ultimately is, how do we work together more closely? I think it depends on our individual context. Here in Japan, there's a great deal of respect for academics. So the work we do is valued. In Australia, it's somewhat different. And I think those who are in Australia, like Effie, will know that sometimes the respect accorded to academics can be quite not what we wish it to be. So how do we work more fruitfully with government and industry? I think being able to speak to them in the same language, being able to declutter a lot of our thinking and making it useful in a way, well, not so much useful, but understandable in bite-sized ways. So with that said, Marianna, that's kind of my 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I think you have pushed us to a next level in terms of how we continue the discussions about, yes, what theory has done for us and what we do for the industry. I'll move on to Steve, because I'm sure he has his own views and perspective in terms of how to boost this collaboration and mutual understanding and collaborations between academia and industry. Steve, please, and the floor is yours. You are kind of an intermediary, if I can use this term, between the industry and us.
Yes, thank you, Marianna, and it's an honor to be in that place. I do have a PowerPoint. I think everybody can see that, and great to be with you. And thank you already. I think SDR has been introduced indirectly, and I appreciate that. SDR obtains a huge amount of different types of hotel data from over 70,000 hotels around the world, 180 different countries. We work with almost all the major chains and thousands of tourism organizations. So Amery and Allison were kind to make that clear. The program that I run is slightly different, and Marianna mentioned I run a program called the Share Center. This is SDR's way to give back to academia. You see the abbreviation there. We launched this program back in 2011, thinking there might be a few universities that would be interested in working with us and taking advantage of our assistance. Never in our wildest imagination did we expect to be working with over 1,000 universities in 80 different countries. So we do two things. The key thing, and the reason we started, was we provide data for academic research and for student projects. Now, we sell it to the hotel companies. So we sell it to Movenpick, actually a core. We sell it to tourism organizations, but for academic research, we basically make it available for free. This is our way to give back to academia. Research support, so some of you have worked with our data before and you understand it. If you haven't, it can be confusing. So we basically make various types of hotel data available. I list on the slide there, and I'll try to get this slide to you. You have my email address as well at the beginning and at the end. But various types of hotel performance metrics like monthly and daily KPIs. So, someone like Amery can find, what are the occupancy and average daily rate trends on the first day of the expo. And Joseph could go back and analyze the Tokyo Olympics and see, wow, what a jump in ADR for the Olympics. So monthly, daily data far back in time. And the professor can pick a user-defined group of hotels. I just want to look at luxury hotels in Tokyo to see, how much their ADR premiums were during the Olympics. We provide aggregated data or unidentified property data for academic research. Now, the unidentified property data can come with the competitor information. So somebody like Freya, who's doing sustainability research, could then correlate, how are these hotels doing versus their competitors related to various sustainability metrics. So it's possible to correlate the STR performance data to third-party data like review data. Somebody mentioned Review Pro. We've worked with RJ for years. It could be Google search data and also survey data. So if a professor generates his or her own survey, then we can correlate performance to the survey results. And I can share countless examples. We've been our STR data has been used in over 500 academic research articles. Most of these appeared in published peer-reviewed journals. And we do a lot of other research roundtables as well. And the audience, the panelists have done a great job introducing you to all the research opportunities. And I just listed a bunch on here that I've been seeing. I started tracking this. I started tracking bright spots in the storm in the middle of 2020 to see what, there were destinations that were doing really well. I could spend hours showing you examples of unusual situations that we've seen in 2020 and 2021. Look at the travel behaviors that are so different, and the shorter booking windows. You nailed it. 14 days is what we're seeing. All destinations are not created equal. Over and over again, places like Sanya, Sochi, who've done really well in the midst of a pandemic. Think about this, over tourism. Nobody's been complaining about that recently. You have the industry has an opportunity for a do-over when it comes to over tourism. All hotels are not created equal. There's some hotels out there that are doing awesome during the midst of this, and which ones and what are the differences? And then, of course, what's next? All kinds of interesting thoughts as far as the future is concerned. Many of you have mentioned that already, but the opportunity is there. We try our best to work with academia and just let us know if we can be of help when it comes to academic research. We have various ways we help in the classroom as well. I'll just let you get that from the PowerPoint if you'd like that. So. Great to be involved with everyone and great to be able to share with you.
Thank you. Thanks, Steve, and thank you, everyone. Okay, so we have less than half an hour left. I wouldn't like to spend more time in our kind of monologue or interactions among ourselves. I would give the floor to our audience to ask any questions or give their own perspectives to what we have been debating here so far. So start using the chat facility. I will monitor this, and we also have the Q&A session that I will be monitoring for questions. And until people have take the time to type into their questions, I see we already have 2 ones. I will just share them with you, and I will address them to the ones that I think they're more related. So the first question relates to what's the potentiality and impact of virtual or augmented reality for Dubai, and I would say for tourism in general. If it is changing things, in what way, and how maybe we can use this kind of technologies to support sustainability if we can in any way. The other question relates to the impact of vaccination certifications in terms of, from what I understand, the economic impact or mobility impact, but also from a human rights perspective. So if I may, I will go first to Amery to talk about virtual reality and tourism. And if there is somebody else, please raise your hand so I can see it and give you the floor. And then I will ask Freya to respond to this vaccination certificate issue. Amery.
Yes, so the question is about how will virtual reality impact a visit to Dubai? Is that?
Yes, yeah, and my input is, yeah, not just Dubai, but probably if you can share your thoughts about the global industry as well.
Well, it's a great question. I can answer it very well because I've spent the last 3 days at Expo in the sustainability pavilion area. And I can tell you in 3 days, I've only seen 7 out of 200 pavilions. So it's definitely worth, if you're going to come, that's my pitch, come see Expo. What's really interesting is the amount of virtual reality that's at Expo in all the different pavilions so that you can experience their destination. And so I've gone and I try everything, and it's wonderful, but you don't get a feeling. You don't get the essence of the place. It's not always, if any, probably the best projections, it's not virtual, I suppose it's virtual reality. Best projections is Saudi Arabia. Yeah, it actually made me want to go on holidays in Saudi Arabia, and that's not a normal thing normally, but it was done so well. So there is an experience, but I've been to Tasmania 4 times, and I love it because of the feeling, the essence of the place, the smell, the animals running everywhere, the unexpected, the bird calls. You just don't get that in virtual reality. So I would say that it's great to showcase your hotel or your destination to pique interest, but people want meaningful travel now. They're looking for experiential feelings. They've been sitting at home looking at computers and they're over it. So I think that reality is just the teaser to get you out and actually go see and feel the destination.
Can I add to that?
Yes,
Marianna?
please go on. Yes.
Yeah, no, I'll 100% support that, and certainly a lot of the research we did at Tourism Tasmania before I left was about what makes you choose a destination, and it was about connecting with how it makes you feel and that the smell of the air and the quality of the air and the clarity of vision through the air, believe it or not, because our tagline ended up being "Come down for air." That all of the insights fed into that. So it's exactly the opposite of engaging in anything technological. And also, I do recall from a few years ago now at a coffee, we had a really great paper, and I wish I could remember. It might have been Brent Moyle, but I can't remember. Someone did a paper on actually the virtual reality, how it impacts if you share virtual reality experiences of the Great Barrier Reef, whether it actually piques interest or dampens it. And the research, I don't even know how robust it was, but what they were saying was that actually people went, well, I've seen it now, I don't really need to go there. And whilst that might be okay from protecting the reef and looking after it from the fossil fuel perspective and everything else, there was the economic contribution to Cairns and all of those other places up the reef wouldn't exist if people didn't feel the need to go there anymore.
Yeah. Well, the impact of virtual reality, I think it's a two-sided coin, isn't it? I mean, it can really create interest and boost visitation. But then if the virtual reality is not good enough, maybe it can even demotivate people to go there. Yeah, it might undermine the real beauties of a place, and people might lose interest, or the impact can actually be anything, isn't it? My question as a researcher always is, we give our perspective about virtual reality from our own experiences. We know what is the real experience, and this is what we want. What about the new generation, that they have no idea about what is a real experience? They are being raised in lockdowns and they never seen other people. They might be scared to see people in front of them, and they might take for granted that the virtual is the normal and the in-person is the abnormal. So I think we always need to be open-minded in some way.
Can I comment there, Marianna, that you said
yes,
that we
please. I was going
approached...
to come to you anyway.
Okay, well, I'll lead into the question you were going to ask me, but on this, you're right that we take this from our own experience. I'm now disabled, so my ability to travel will be different in the future. So the one thing about the virtual reality is it offers an opening to the world, maybe for people with disabilities, that will be really important. I'm hopeful for it for sustainability. But the idea that people are afraid of travel as well. There have been some great tours to Palestine. I'm interested and have researched on Palestine in my work, and there's been some really beautiful tours. There's one that's coming up about the urban art in Palestine on the street art coming up, which is a really beautiful way to see what's on offer. But you're right, it is a hook to try to get people to come in future. Marianna, I'll address the question that you were asking about vaccine passports. I didn't see who asked it, but thank you. That's a great question. I would just like to say, when I advocate for looking at the bigger picture, I think one thing the tourism industry could have done, and I think by and large it didn't, was to advocate to get vaccine equity to the developing world, because we're still not free of variants in the virus. And if we all want to open up and be free and have our movement, the rolling out of the vaccines to the countries and the communities that haven't had access to it is really important. And again, in this message about capitalism, right now within the UN World Trade Body, there's talk about lifting the patent protections on the vaccines so that developing countries could create the vaccines for themselves, manufacture the vaccines for their own communities. And again, I haven't heard a lot of voices speaking out for that. I think maybe Skip said something about that being important. For the passports, we're seeing this being one of the fault lines socially about the privilege of the vaccine passports, that some will have it. Some people are afraid that it will become a mechanism for control, for authoritarianism. So there's a lot of bigger picture things to think about with this. But of course, then there's this technical thing that it enables us to move. It enables communities to try to ensure that they're safe when they receive visitors as we open up. But I do think that we need to look at it in multiple and complex ways. So in terms of research and thinking about things, it's always good to take a critical lens and again, not be too tourism centric in our thinking. I think as we come out of COVID, that's going to be really important to, yes, we care about the industry. Yes, we care about the tourist, but let's not be too tourism centric, because tourism occurs in this larger context. Marianna, have I addressed the
Beautiful.
question?
Audience will tell with their questions. May I go to Steve? What's your perspective in terms of vaccination passports and how the industry works with technical issues or economic impacts? You have some data probably that can give a different perspective.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. This is one of the things, when we talk about all the lessons to be learned, we never anticipated the type of correlations that we're making with our data. Now we're correlating our data with vaccinations, hospitalizations, cases. I mean, the correlations are limitless, and they've been interesting. You look at Israel, for example. Israel had a big vaccination program at the beginning of the year. Occupancies responded incredibly to that, and so. You see that, but then you see other situations where governments, remove restrictions. Look at the Maldives at the end of the year, the government there removed restrictions. turned tourism back on, and occupancy soared. End of year occupancies in the Maldives were close to 90%. And people came from everywhere, again, demonstrating the pent up demand. You lock people in their houses and then you turn on one island. People came from everywhere, or ski resorts in Switzerland. If there's only one place to go skiing in Switzerland, they come, and in all of Europe, and so many examples like that.
Beautiful. So one more variable to monitor and see the impacts of it. Another interesting series of questions relates to what it has been called revenge travel or tourism. People being fatigued and just want to escape and probably not behaving as responsible or as sustainable as they should have been, or what we would like them to be as academics. I have recently visited Acropolis in Athens, and I was shocked to see the masses of tourists visiting and behaving in the old norm. And at the same extent, I have probably seen the reaction from the supply point of view in the same way. I will call it not revenge tourism, but revenge business. Businesses having lost a lot of revenues, and now that they see the crowds coming back, behaving in probably the same way or even worse, trying to recover the lost losses within limited time, practicing different profiting businesses and whatever that might be. So, Joseph, what is your perspective in terms of that? Revenge tourism from both sides. Is it something that we need to research, to respond, to do something? Do you think the industry is ready to become sustainable? Is the tourism demand ready to behave differently? And what's going on there?
Yeah, I think when we generalize, we lose sight of some of the cultural nuances. I mean, here in Japan, I don't see any evidence of revenge tourism, but again, it's because of those cultural nuances. But it's interesting, when we talk about what you've just mentioned about businesses intent on loss recovery, if we stand in their shoes, we understand exactly why, right? There's a renewed sense of opportunism, one would say. We just have to look at airlines and this idea, and Freya talks about the idea of crisis capitalism in some of her work, right? This idea that when we start reopening, we will recognize that many of the mum and dad businesses have fallen away. They don't have the capacity to recover as quickly. So we will see the shift here in Japan. It's the large hotel groups that are benefiting from the new rise in tourism, because in many small towns, hotels, small ryokans are closed. So one person's loss recovery is another person's opportunity. And I read today about in Bali, one of the largest nightclubs in Kuta. The quote from the owner was, "We just need more heavy drinkers to come back to help us with our tourism recovery." Now that kind of rhetoric is really, really damaging for the very things that we're trying to achieve, right? So yes, from a supply side point of view, I think while ideally we sit back and we ask the industry to recalibrate and rethink how they do things, there's this great urgency to recover the losses. From the demand side of view, and I see this in Australia, many of my friends, I haven't been home for 12 months. There's this cabin fever. Everybody wants to get out quickly, right? There's almost going to be this stampede once the borders open. So I'm usually an optimistic person, but I fear that the compulsion to just get out and to kind of release the shackles is going to determine how this all works out. I sense there'll be an amount of chaos at the beginning, but I honestly can't make head or tail of it, Marianna, to be honest.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your perspective. Amery, what do you think from a tourism industry perspective? Is that true? And do you have any examples of companies that they are not that opportunistic, but they do have some examples of new, more sustainable practices?
Revenge tourism is something that we've been talking about for months, and we thought that it would happen in summer this year, and it didn't, because the UK and Europe pretty much stayed closed. So we were hoping for that opportunity. And I can say that, yes, I work for a huge international company with a core. And so we had no visibility to what Expo was going to do for us. When we were writing budgets and forecasts and STR, we're listening, okay, we think we're going to go up 8% in Q4. That's good. It's, it's positive. I can't, we don't even know what the numbers are because every day the demand just keeps going up. So, and you say chaos, it is chaotic. And it's literally, we are doing revenue management, balancing supply and demand 3 times a day. And we're because it's all about market share, because yes, we've lost millions and millions and millions. We have outstanding invoices worth millions and millions and millions of dollars. And we have our owners have been reaching in through their pockets for the last 18 months to pay for the hotels, to pay for salaries. And so we are, this is unprecedented and unique. So I think we are probably getting it more than most destinations, because we're kind of that, we're just that balloon, and it's just filling and filling and filling. And it's literally like every single night is New Year's Eve here. And if you know understand the impact of New Year's Eve on a market, we are seeing every day so far this since the 7th of October, and forecasting until the 20th of January right now, every night's New Year's Eve. So it's the perfect storm, and we are concerned about COVID cases. We are concerned about people's health and safety. People are coming from all over the world, and there are different interpretations of safety all around the world. And some people are quite aggressive that I'm not wearing a mask, you can't tell me to do that. Luckily, Dubai is a place that you have to be compliant, because you'll go to jail very easily if you aren't. So, or heavily. So there are,
hopefully that's not the way others will follow.
But it is, what you're saying is 100% true. And I appreciate the sustainability. I appreciate the need for environmentally controlling things. I can say Dubai is doing this push and this revenge very well. There's people telling you to maintain distance, wear your masks every 5 feet. There are so many officers everywhere. They understand we have an opportunity to do this well, and we're doing it incredibly well. So I think, we look at the Japan COVID numbers, and there was a huge spike. Will we see the same thing in Dubai? Not sure. But we're definitely, it is supply and demand. We have a 6-month opportunity with Expo, and for the record, for Australians, you should be very proud of your pavilion, because it's one of the best. But take advantage of this while we can, because summers here we get no business in summer because it's 50 degrees and 90% humidity. So we are a binge business. Yes.
Beautiful. Well, I think the hard reality that we need to realize is that unless if there is financial sustainability, meaning companies having the means to do something, probably they will not go to invest on issues like environmental, climate change, you name it. And unless if we change priorities, this is the way that economy is going to work. That's my perspective. I know time is running up. We still have 5 minutes and many questions. I will try to combine them all, the questions, into one, and give the chance to everyone to share their perspective on that. So if I try to summarize issues raised, people identify rural tourism or different forms of alternative tourism as a way probably to develop and promote sustainability. What do you think these opportunities represent to destinations or companies to develop, to boost that? And what opportunities they present to universities in terms of research topics and areas to investigate? And what probably the actions that universities could do? I will start with you, Allison, first, if you don't mind, to position yourself into that theme.
I was too busy looking at Steve with his hand up, worrying that we've missed something really valuable from what he was going to say. Did you see that, Marianna?
I'm trying to put my eyes in different windows, so I haven't probably been effective on that.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead, Allison. I'll follow up after you.
No, that's all right, because I was struggling to get the full gist of that question anyway. Sorry, Marianna.
Okay. Yeah. No,
okay, so we go with Steve. That helps, yeah.
Real quick. I was at an industry conference last month, and one of the keynote speakers said that the industry, the hospitality and tourism industry, they did mention tourism, are in uncharted waters, sort of like what Freya was saying. And you know, if you go back to what Amery had mentioned about revenue management, it's different now. You know, revenue management post-COVID, there are significant differences to that. The big issue right now that industry is talking about are labor shortages. And when you look at the profitability data, there's some really interesting things to study in that. And hotels in the US actually regained profitability back to 2019 levels in July. So, but they're doing it differently. And a lot of, just so many research opportunities for academia. When I heard uncharted waters, the question about rural tourism that Marianna just mentioned is a perfect example of that. And I can share literally hundreds of examples of rural tourism being successful during COVID, and in every area of the world. That was the case. I mean, Australia was the best example of that, where you have Darwin, blowing away records in the midst of a pandemic, and so many possibilities for researchers. Would be great to just spend a day sitting around brainstorming, either virtually or in person, just brainstorming on the possibilities and figuring out how to do these kinds of things together. It's really an unprecedented opportunity for academic research at this point in history.
And sometimes I perceive myself like a volcanologist, waiting for a volcano to erupt, so I have a subject to study. That's how it feels like. Allison, yes. Sorry if I surprised you before.
No, that's fine. I was just thinking there were so many elements to that question. So I thought what I might do is just think about it in terms of, I read a couple of what you were talking about there, Marianna, and this idea that we're seeing business as usual while we're talking about and exploring, and everyone's getting excited about Venice and the way it looks after not having so many visitors, and, dolphins back in harbours and all of these wonderful things, and people are starting to talk about how fantastic it is. Well, how can we, but yet at the same time, as the sort of valves release, people are so desperate to attract that business that they're really going to just put that on the back burner and welcome with open arms these huge volumes of people. How can we as researchers assist that? I think probably one of the most important things from my perspective is to approach our research with deep empathy. I think it is so important to understand the true, and certainly this has been in our face in a lot of the work that we've been doing in the last few months, to really deeply understand the personal challenges that people are going through. People whose parents have passed away in a different country and they haven't been able to see them, the financial pressures and things like that. I think, to lift your eyes, to talk about these other things, it can be done and it should be done, but I think we need to be very aware of the people we're talking to. And I think we really need to start asking some more kind questions, and really seeking to understand those people, that they're not just people we need to get information out of. They're human beings who are suffering through a crisis, possibly in a way that we couldn't imagine.
Very valid point. Yeah, respect or understanding. Okay, well, time is over, but I will give the opportunity to 3 more of our members to position themselves if they wish, before I put a closer to that, because we have another session starting in 15 minutes. Who would like to say something? If somebody would like to to share some final thoughts. Freya, yes.
I really loved what Allison said, and I just add in solidarity. When we had the bushfires here in Australia, there was a campaign called Book Them Out and Come with Empty Eskies as a sign of that. So rural areas are going to need futures and better quality of life around the world because we're urbanizing around the world. So let's use tourism for good, and let's use our research to build up quality of life in rural areas. Thank you.
Beautiful. Tourism for good. Joseph.
Well, I just thank you, everyone. It's been a pleasure. I just posted a short message. For me, I think the central dilemma when it comes to sustainable tourism is, do we use the carrot or the stick? You know, do we incentivize or do we regulate? I think that's going to give us a really good idea about which, you know, whether we can achieve a more sustainable brand of tourism. And you're right, rural tourism is vitally important. Here in Japan, rural tourism for revitalization is something we're working on. Can we revitalize areas where there's a negative birth rate, where population is declining, where urbanization is rife? These are some of the questions that next time we have this, we can provide answers, Marianna.
Yes, next time we will have the answers. Stay tuned. Steve, I don't want to bypass you.
Marianna, thank you for organizing this. I think this is great. This is, you know, we need more of this, and the offer is still open as far as brainstorming is concerned. Would love to do that with all of you. Would love to have industry involved, and Allison and Amery. This is fantastic to be able to have these communication channels. You know, we all talk about bridging the gap, and we need more and more events like this to do that. Thank you, Marianna.
Thank you. So I won't delay the panel more. I would like to thank all our 5 very interesting and disrupting, thought-provoking members, Allison, Amery, Joseph, Freya, and Steve. And from me, thank you all for attending and keeping us on an alert and in a stimulated, quite productive and valuable dialogue. Take a break. And stay tuned. We have a very interesting keynote speaker following. So see you soon as well. Thanks, everyone. Thank you all.
Thanks, Marianna.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.